Okay, you're ready. You have everything in place and you are ready to sit down and write this story. Except then you have no words. There's nothing. Nothing really matters. What is life? Maybe you should clean an oven. By the way, if you are volunteering to clean an oven to avoid writing, I volunteer mine, just saying. But you know me, I'm actually really into you getting your book written and out there and onto the page so it can be enjoyed by readers. And also, I think the process of writing a book can be a lot of fun and you should lean into the fun of that. So rather than pulling out the cleaning products or pulling up your favorite streaming service and then binge watching a TV show, how about you hang around and I am going to give you 5 ways that you can start your story, start your book, and get into the fun of putting that awesome story onto the page. So whether you're an author who is stuck looking at a blank page and unsure of how to unlock your creativity, or if you know you have a way that you do things, but oh my goodness, you just heard from some expert that it has to be this certain way or else, you're doing it all wrong, you're in the right place here with the Author Culture Podcast. And I encourage you to hang around and check out these 5 ways to start a story. I'm Janeen Ippolito. Let's talk. And welcome back to the Author Culture Podcast, where we're all about sustainable success for authors so that you can navigate the chaotic publishing world and reach your unique finish line. We're also about sci-fi and fantasy joy because, hey, I'm a sci-fi and fantasy author and it's my podcast. So whether you showed up to explore writing craft, marketing tips, publishing guidance, or you just want to geek out, you are in the right place, and I am so glad you're here. And if you want to continue our spectacular jam session, make sure that you hit that subscribe button on YouTube and the notification bell so that you never miss an episode, or otherwise subscribe on Substack or on iTunes or on Spotify or wherever you're listening to this podcast episode. Now, you know me. I am all about defining the terms, especially when you're tackling a list or some kind of complex topic. But in the case of writing a book, let me tell you, you can just type that into your search engine and there are so many people who want to tell you the right way to prep and the right way to figure out characters and the right way to do all of that stuff. And if you need that specific guidance, if you really need, taken through step by step, that is legit. I am not throwing shade at that. I too have a course that helps you to figure out how to write a marketable story. But the thing is, I am first and foremost all about making sure that you're having some kind of fun and creative joy as you're working on your first draft, because that fun, that joy, that spark is going to show up on the page. And that's not something that you can duplicate. That's not something that you can program. That is a gorgeous part of who you are as an author. And that's the kind of story magic that readers pick up on and that can really help your story connect with the right readers. You make the sales, you make those connections, and it is a beautiful thing. And so even in my marketable story prep course, we're all about starting with your reasons, with the fun, and helping you figure out what is your spark with this story. And so in this episode today, we are just going to dive right into those fantastic ways that you can start a story, that you can jumpstart your creativity and connect with this amazing work that you're going to put on the page. This can also be helpful if you're contemplating creating a story for an anthology or for a reader magnet of some kind, and you have to fit a certain mold, but also you do actually want to have some fun and you want to start the book in a way that makes sense for you. You want to start the flash fiction or the short story from a place where you are genuinely interested in writing and not just kind of grunting words on the page because you have to, because this is what professional authors do. So here's your first way that you can start a story. So the first way you can start a story is with the plot. And this can include those authors out there who like to start from the midpoint, who like to figure out the midpoint of the story first. There are some authors who just really like to know that the book they're writing is going to in some way have structure, that it's going to make sense, that it's going to flow in a certain way, especially if you're a pantser who is trying to kick yourself over into plotting more. You may want to incorporate your plotting or at least a few key plot points into your first draft and start from there just so that you know it's on the page. And the way that you can start a story from the plot is just focus on a plot point that you're most interested in. So you might say, well, I'm really interested in the midpoint of the story. I'm really interested in the change moment. I want to get the midpoint figured out. We're going to start from the middle and we're going to figure out what that midpoint is and go from there. And if you want some deeper guidance on this, I highly recommend James Scott Bell's book, Right from the Middle. It is really great at helping you figure out how to start your story from the middle, from that midpoint moment, from that moment of internal change for your protagonist. It's awesome. And if you're the kind of person who tends towards a messy or muddy middle, nailing your midpoints can be a great way to just give yourself a sigh of relief and go, okay, that was fun. That was great. I've got that figured out. And now we're going to fill in the rest of the story around it. In this case, you can also start your story from the inside incident, start it from a key plot point, start it from the climax. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to give you ideas and options. When I was working on my book, Met by Midnight, I wrote the scene where the Cinderella character goes to the ball, and I figured out the whole scene where she goes to the ball, she sneaks behind their backs to go into the palace and steal something. Yes, it's a very different Cinderella retelling. And she gets caught by the prince, and I wrote that whole chunk first, and then I added chapters to the beginning, and of course I added chapters after that fateful encounter because, we need to finish the book. And the reason for this is that Met by Midnight was inspired by a dream I had, and I basically dreamed that middle part of the story. So I started with that middle part of the story, and that is totally fine. The key when you're doing something plot driven, when you are starting your book from some key scene or moment in the plot, is just making sure eventually you figure out where that scene is in the overall story and building those other scenes around it so you actually have a story. A second way to start a story is, of course, character driven. You can be following the protagonist around on their journey, or you can have an antagonist that you really want to explore. I know you guys out there, I see you people who fall in love with your villains and go, ooh, I want to see what happens. And then of course the hero is going to defeat them, but I just want to see what's going to happen. I see you. It's totally legit to start with the protagonist, to start with the antagonist, to start with a side character. Although I will warn you that if you start with a side character and they get super interesting, sometimes they can take over your story. It can just happen. But in this kind of story where you're starting with a character, often you can start with them on some part of their arc or some part of their journey. You can skip to the end where they get the happy ending and then write yourself towards that ending. You can focus on the character in some smaller moment that inspires you. Any of these things is totally fine and a totally legit way to start your story. So if you're the kind of person that really connects the character, or in this story, you find, wow, this character is really interesting to me, then go ahead, follow them around and see where they're going and see where you can figure out the story from there. A third way you can start a story is with the genre and how the genre and the setting inspires you. Maybe you've read a lot of books in this genre and you want to add your own spin and your own voice to it. You want to add your own take to it. So you're coming to the page and you're going, I want to be kind of like this book with a character from this book and a setting like this book, and then a climax kind of like this book, but then with my own style from this book. And if you are really deeply in love with your genre and your book's genre, and you are like, yes, I want to tell this story in my own way, but I know the genre stuff and I'm so ready to bring it to the page, then go ahead, start with that. Start with some aspect of the genre that makes you laugh. Start with some scene or moment that is so typical of books in this genre that you're like, ooh, I want to write one of those in my own way. I think that'll be a lot of fun. This is actually often a way that I jump into my urban fantasy books, is I get this idea for a one-off fun scene to go in urban fantasy, and then I just take that and I just kind of riff off of it, and I'll throw in some more interesting scenes that are based on this quirky idea, and I go, okay, what would happen if this happened and this happened, and we had a case sheet and we had it in a box, and we're going to go over here, and that's playful and that's fun for me. It's something that I love to read in the genre. I want to add my own voice to these stories that I've loved. And so I start basically inspired by the genre. And then from there, I'm weaving in your characters, your plot, all of those things. Another way that you can start your story is on impulse. And this is those of you who said, I just did something and started writing or started dictating, and then we just went there. I also call this the pure pantsers method. You're just going to follow your feels or follow your interest and let it fly. This can happen if you're writing a book because you need to reduce stress, because you need some kind of outlet for emotions. You need to get some feels on the page. You have an interesting line that pops into your head and you're like, ooh, I like that line. Okay, we're going to follow that line of dialogue and just see what happens. And so sometimes you just start a story or start a book based on impulse, and that is totally legit. When I worked on my book, Nobody's Hero, it started off as a serialized story that I wrote because I was in kind of a stressful place. And I'm like, okay, we're just going to follow these two characters around and see what kind of superhero hijinks they get into and just see what happens. And I purposely didn't want it to be overly structured. I didn't want to get attached to anything too much because I just needed something lighthearted and chill. Now, of course, as I finished the book and did edits, I did have to put a structure onto things and refine it in a way that readers can also make sense of it. But hey, you are in your first draft right now. And if you need to write something on impulse to just process it and get it out of your head and you're going to figure out the details later, that is totally fine, my friend. And a fifth way that you can start your book is by asking a question and having it be question driven. You know those high concept questions that sometimes if you're pitching an agent across the table, they'll say, oh, what's your high concept? Or a marketer will say, what's your high concept? I know there are some of you authors out there who actually start your story with that big question. And this whole story is built around that big question and that theme that you're exploring and that message you're trying to get to. And that's really what pushes you into the story. And this doesn't have to be super deep or philosophical, although it can. It can kind of also be, what if? What is this thing? What does it do? How shall I poke it? That's all legit. And that way of starting a story by following a question, by following an idea and seeing where it goes is fantastic. And I recommend that you just figure out what that question or idea is so that you can intentionally follow it around, since that is your motivating factor, and then go ahead and see where it takes you within the context of a story. Now, inquiring minds might ask, but wait, Janeen, can't I start with more than one? Can't I just mix and mash things? Can't I be interested in a scene that also connects with my genre, but also includes a character that I like, and then be chasing them around to follow a high concept point? Can't I do that? Of course you can. I'm not going to stop you. The whole point of this is for you to have fun and get your story on the page and keep yourself motivated. And you know me, I love a good mashup. And here at Author Culture, we are all about helping you refine your writing process so that you can figure out the ways that are going to work best for you and not the person next to you, because you're not them and they're not you. You are you. And I want to see you reach your finish line and the next one and keep getting those great books out to readers who need them. So, amazing authors out there, how do you start writing your stories? Do you start with a character? Do you start with a scene? Do you start with a high concept idea? Does it vary according to the story? I would love to learn about it. Please drop your thoughts in a comment below the video on YouTube, on Substack, or on social media. And thanks so much for hanging out with me today. This is Janeen Ippolito of Author Culture. Go forth and be awesome.